Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. My name is Richard from the Seneca team, and today we're going to look at a run through of Seneca and how that links to remote learning, and a mixture of theory behind the remote learning and what research has been done, but also thinking about how practically you can use Seneca to sort of make the most of this theory and this research that's been done. So we're going to take around 20-25 minutes to go through the session. There'll be some time towards the end for some questions. So if you do have questions, what you need to do is you just need to pop them in the chat on Zoom. So if you're on Zoom, you'll see that the message has just popped up there. Just pop any questions you have in there as and when you have them. And I'm happy to answer those as we go through, or as I say, I'll leave some time towards the end. Now, as I say, we're going to look at some theory, and the way that's going to work is we're going to look at a EEF literature review that was completed back in April this last year, that looked basically at supporting schools with remote learning. And as I say, we're going to talk about how Seneca can help with each of these recommendations that were made, and the resources that we've got available to support you as a teacher, but also to support your school and your students as well. So we've got the EEF review screenshot is here. A bit of background on this EEF review, as I mentioned, it was commissioned by the DfE in response to the first lockdown in March, so it was published in April, and it was a really rapid examination of the existing research there was around remote learning, and it looked at 60 different reviews and meta-analyses to basically look at 4 approaches that schools could start to use when we were first experiencing this very unusual situation of remote learning that we're becoming all too familiar with now. And the review looks at 5 key recommendations of things to consider when implementing strategies to support pupils through remote learning, but also looking at supporting parents as well, and using being aware of their role within the learning process. So let's go through each of those 5 recommendations, and what I'm going to do is each recommendation is going to have some ideas and background on how Seneca or different apps can help support you with these recommendations. So the first, and I think very reassuring sort of suggestion in the review, is that teaching quality is more important than how a lesson is delivered. So pupils can still learn through remote learning, which I personally find really reassuring. Obviously, there is still, in my opinion, still not as good as being in the classroom, but there is still learning that can happen, and students can still benefit and progress through remote learning. And the recommendation basically talks about how high quality teaching is high quality teaching, no matter how you deliver it. So it says you should be reviewing your practice, making sure that you are using elements of effective teaching in your remote learning or remote schooling, however you're delivering it, be that sort of clear explanations, be that scaffolding, regular and timely feedback, all these things that are effective classroom teaching, they still apply to remote learning. And the sort of how you teach is more important. Sorry, the how you teach in terms of the delivery is more important than necessarily the method of delivery or when you do the teaching. So an example of this is that there's no clear difference between or the research says anyway, there's no clear difference between a real-time lesson you're delivering to your pupils and something that you've recorded. So one example it talks about in the review is that you might explain an idea either live or as a pre-recorded video, and that isn't really what matters in terms of which of those you do. What does matter is that you are explaining to build on pupils' prior learning. You're making sure that pupils are building understanding, and their understanding is also being assessed. So it really boils down to the same principles you have in the classroom, making sure you're still applying those. Now, some ways in which Seneca can help with this is what we're seeing a lot of schools that do at the moment is with the new sort of mandate from government in terms of providing lessons to students from schools and being a bit more prescriptive about what those look like. We're seeing a lot of schools do a little bit of teacher teacher talk, so they are delivering content, be that by video or in a live lesson, and then they're using Seneca as that form of assessment to follow up, but also to develop understanding of the concept that they're delivering. Or some schools are also setting it as a homework task as well. But picking up on some of those points in this first section of how Seneca can support is that, first of all, thinking about the writing style that we use on Seneca. And when we're talking about high quality, effective delivery of content, we are very careful to deliver content in a really specific way that lowers cognitive load and improves learning outcomes. So what you'll see in this example from a geography course is we make sure that every sentence stands alone on them by itself. We're not asking students to recall information from the previous sentence in order to make the current sentence make sense. And this helps to lower cognitive load and helps students to learn more effectively. That's just one way in which we show this. Also, bullet points have been proven to be helpful in delivery of content as well, and other ways as well. So as well as that, we also provide the differentiation that you'll be doing in the classroom that is considered good practice by most people. It automatically happens within Seneca. So we use the data and we use algorithms to basically tailor what students see to make sure that they are being delivered the content that's right for them as an individual. So that might be giving students more support if they seem to be struggling in a particular concept, but also giving students extra, pushing them on further if they need to be stretched as well. So as part of that, we, as I say, we have these courses that are delivered with that differentiation happening automatically, and you don't need to worry about the delivery of that for your students. We've also got the automatic feedback. So students, as they go through a learning session, they get automatic feedback instantly based on their answers. So again, they're able to learn and understand even when they're not sure what the answer is. And there's also the option then for you to obviously see the data and make the most of that data. Now, in terms of using that data and how you then take it forward, you can obviously put some of your own, do something yourself to put it in there. But we also offer what we call a smart reassignment feature, where you can reassign work automatically based on the student data. So that will be something like looking at work that's incomplete, or looking at work where students got less than 50% as a best score, and resetting that work for students so that they can be having really tailored follow-up activities based on their understanding and knowledge. Now, the other way we do it is it also mentions talking about making sure that understanding is assessed after delivery of content. And again, this is something we are able to support you with. So on Seneca, you might know our free courses are available with content followed by like questioning to help students with low stakes quizzing. Now, we also provide standardized assessment courses for free as well. These can be thought of as like topic-based tests for students to go through, and you can get the data on those as well. So you can assess students' understanding as they go as well. Just a question that's come through from CLL Miller. Says, do I need to put the names myself, or will it be done automatically via Google Classroom? So the way it works when you create a class on Seneca is that you basically use your Google Classroom to communicate with your students, but it integrates with Seneca. So what happens is you share a link with your students on Google Classroom. Those students just and there's a little button to sort of integrate within Seneca to make sure you're sending it to the right class. Students then just click on that link, and then that joins them to your class on Seneca. But we're also working on adding extra integrations with Google Classroom as well. Now, the second suggestion in the EEF review was to make sure that there is access to technology, and making sure that's particularly thought about for disadvantaged pupils. Now, we know that that's obviously really important, and we also know that almost all remote learning relies on digital technology. So typically there will be access to computers and the internet as well, and just making sure that your school is providing for them where I know that the sort of government rollout of that hasn't been as effective in all areas. But hopefully your pupils are in a position where they have access to technology. Again, as I mentioned sort of just a moment ago, this is particularly important for disadvantaged pupils, because those are the pupils who are most likely to face barriers of access to technology. But on a separate note, in terms of like moving away from access to technology, but understanding how to use technology is also really important in this. So it's really, really important that teachers and pupils as well have access to support and guidance on specific platforms that they're using, particularly if those platforms are new. So, and that doesn't have to be in-person training, that could just be an opportunity to ask questions, it could be online videos to watch, it could be anything. And a few different ways that, again, we support with this at Seneca is firstly our platform is available on any device. So if your pupil doesn't have a laptop at home, but they do have access to a smartphone, it will work on any device and it will be supported through that. There's an Android app that students can download and access Seneca. So so they can still continue learning even if they don't have access to a device. And then also in terms of training support, specifically for teachers in this example, we make sure that the class setup process is very straightforward, and we always offer help. So you'll see there's an option to get help there at any stage of that setup process. It will be taken through to like a video basically of me talking about how to do each of these stages to make sure that you get your classes fully set up and you understand how Seneca works. But if you don't know, if you're not sort of you're finding that difficult, you're not really understanding how to do it, we've also got an FAQs page with loads of, again, more videos, more explanation on how to do different things that you can just search for. But there's also obviously a live chat that you can talk to my colleague Olivia on, and she'll be able to give you some support and guidance on those, anything you're finding difficult as well. Now moving on to the third suggestion, and it looks at peer interaction, which is a bit more of a tricky one that when I talk to teachers, they're finding that side of things quite difficult. But the EEF say it's really important for increasing motivation and making sure that pupils' outcomes still remain high. Both those things have been linked with peer interaction. Sorry. Now, this is across multiple different reviews that were looked at. They highlighted the importance of this, particularly during remote learning. And some of the strategies explored were, first of all, peer marking and feedback, and also sharing models of good work and giving opportunities for live discussion of content. Now, I know some of these may seem more difficult than others. These are things that are useful on the face of it, but actually doing them practically can be quite difficult. But they do sort of, in the EEF review, they do acknowledge that these different approaches might be better suited to different delivery of different content, but also to different groups of pupils, so different age groups and different groups. And you, as their teacher, will understand best what will work with your pupils. Now, as I say, I've worked with lots of schools over the last 6 months who have found this part of it particularly tricky. The peer interaction, the live discussions of content, how to make sure that doesn't all just fall apart as soon as you get onto a Zoom call. And again, some schools I've seen doing it really well. It's really focused on, rather than, okay, let's focus on what's not working, let's try and work out how we can get this to work. How can we get something like live discussion to work? And one thing I saw used really well was through shared message boards and shared like collaborative apps as well. So as an example, there's a collaborative mind mapping app called Miro, which is really good and I'd really recommend. And you can see the different names of different people who are making different changes. Everyone can collaborate it all at once, and then you can review it as a group. But then there's also something like Google Docs, which if you're not familiar with, it's basically an online and collaborative version of Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. You can have access to as well. Just like Google Docs, if you just Google that, it will come up. And then from a Seneca perspective, again, how we see lots of schools using the data on Seneca is basically to drive and motivate pupils. So by sharing pupil level data, either on a topic level, like it's on your screen now, or on sort of an overview level, like this here, where you sort of like total learning time and number of sessions completed and things like that. Schools are using these as like leaderboards, basically, to motivate pupils through that, using just the class data. And then there's also the option for students to motivate themselves. So on their students' accounts, they're able to see exactly how they rank for each course against everybody in the world who's done that course. So they can see their ranking go up and down as they study more. But they can also see this on a class basis as well. And you'll notice here that every one of those lines is a student. They've all got pseudonyms that we don't use the real names on those leaderboards to make sure it's still kept confidential. Now, the fourth suggestion looks at supporting pupils to work independently. Now, with everything that's going on, obviously it's a terrible situation, but there are some potential sort of, silver linings. I like to try and sort of see the positives and things, and where it's possible. And pupils are being forced to work more independently just by the nature of the situation. So if we're able as educators to give them the tools to work independently, it's an opportunity for them to develop those skills. And that's something that's been particularly looked at in this review. And lots of reviews talk about how important it is to make sure you are giving students strategies to work independently. So some of the examples that they give are prompting pupils to reflect on their work or consider the different strategies that they will use if they get stuck, but before they get stuck, so they know how to access support. And there's wider evidence around metacognition and self-regulation that's not linked to remote learning, but it's the wider evidence suggests that this is particularly important for disadvantaged pupils, as they're more likely to benefit from the explicit support to help them work independently. And these could be things as simple as providing a checklist of things to cover in a lesson, or a daily plan, things like that, trying to build that routine back in that they would normally have by coming to school, trying to help with that routine while they're learning from home. Now, again, some of the ways that Seneca can help with this is we have on each session, students can see exactly how well they've done on each session. So when you're trying to build independence, part of that is also driving their own learning. And you can see here the little circles to the right-hand side of the topic names are basically how well I, as a student, have done in each of those topics. So I can understand how that is developing, and I can look at what I need to look back at, what I need to work on based on the circles there. And that's all I've talked about today is being available for free. But just in case you do work in a premium school, we do have a couple of independent learning tools that will support students in premium schools as well. And one is called Wrong Answer Mode. This helps students by bringing together all of the wrong answers into one place. So again, if they're not sure where they should be studying, they could be focusing on the areas that they struggle with most using the Wrong Answer Mode. And then there's also another premium tool we have, is called Smart Learning Mode, which basically uses the data more holistically that we have on students, and it looks in more detail at how long students have been since they've studied different topics, how well they did in linked topics, and all this other bits of data to basically kind of create a timetable for students to work through and revisit the information at the right time for their learning. So those two things are available if you work in a premium school. Now, the fifth and final suggestion that's made in this EEF review is to recognise that there are different approaches to remote learning, and these different approaches suit different content and different pupils. So I touched on this earlier, but there are so many different approaches to remote learning, and they vary a lot. So, and the sort of research shows that they have different strengths and weaknesses, the different methods of delivery. So what it says is that teachers should be supported to make sure they're considering which approaches are best suited to the content they're delivering, and also the age of their pupils and the knowing the pupils that they have in front of them on a screen. So some examples given were, again, looking at specific subjects. We have, there's a lot of evidence behind the fact that games are particularly effective at supporting students with vocab learning in modern languages, but there's less evidence around games in other subjects. So just being aware that the method of delivery is really important for your specific subject, and making sure that you are supporting students in the best way you can for your subject. Now, it's also the suggestion talks about retrieval practice, and how retrieval practice is a really good way of using technology through self-quizzing and making sure that, because basically retrieval practice improves students' chances of retaining information and ideas long term. But what they say is that it's not a replacement for other forms of assessment. So make sure you are not just using retrieval practice as your assessment tool in your lessons. Now, again, how Seneca can support with this fifth and final suggestion in the review is that when you look at a Seneca session, around 20% of what a student sees is content to learn, and around 80% of what the student sees are questions. So there is a constant, so 80% of the session basically is retrieval practice, and the EEF recognizes that this is really important for helping students to retain information and knowledge. On top of that, we also have an acknowledgement and a sort of understanding that this is not a replacement for assessment of your students. So we also provide you other course types for free. And these are available here on the left-hand side. You'll see them. So you've got our standard courses that just, as I've said, cover sort of the content and also the retrieval practice questions. But you'll see there, we've also got standardized assessment courses, which I've talked about a bit earlier. But when you're thinking about assessment, those standardized assessment courses are really where that's where they come in really useful. And you can kind of think of them, the equivalents like end of topic test, essentially. So you can think of using those as sort of your assessment with your pupils. There's also other courses that we offer with our premium packages. And again, if you're in a premium school, I just want to mention those to make sure you're aware of them, just so you have a greater variety of content that you can call on. Everything from our predicted paper courses, which are exam style questions for pupils, hardest questions, which go into more detail and new questions on the hardest concepts, or even looking at things like the Fortified Boost and the Premium Knowledge that target specific students aiming for particular grades. These are all extra content for you to use to assess your pupils' understanding and give them a greater opportunity to engage in retrieval practice. Now, the final thing I want to say is not actually linked to the review, but I think we're seeing a lot of schools find this very useful on Seneca at the moment. So we want to make sure that if you want to, you have access to this, and it's our parent platform. So parents can sign up and create an account for free, and they can connect to their child for free, and they can see exactly what their child's been up to. So you can see here that I've got a child. You can see how well they've been doing on different subjects and different courses that they've been studying. And it allows the parent to feel much more involved in the learning process. And all we need, this is there and available, ready to use if you want to use this with the parents of your students. It will help communication between school and parent much more simple, because this happens automatically as students study on Seneca. And if you want to make the most of this this opportunity on Seneca, we have a number of different resources to help you share this with pupils, because at the end of the day, share this with parents. Because at the end of the day, you hold the relationship with parents, and if you want to use it, that's there, and we provide you with templates and printable cards you can hand out to pupils if you want, maybe after COVID though. But also sort of how-to videos as well. So I'll post them in the chat now and with links. And if you want to get access to any of those, you can just click on the links to use them. The SMS template is being seen to be the most effective. So if you want to make the most of that, then that's all available there for you. Anyway, that is that in terms of what I wanted to talk about in today's session. So as a reminder, we've talked through those 5 different recommendations on the EEF review. and how Seneca can support you with each of those. And I just want to acknowledge as well, I know this is a really tricky time at the moment. Some pupils are finding it difficult, teachers are finding it difficult, I know, when I speak to schools. So it's a really tough time. We hope we can help with providing either free resources if you're in a free school, or the premium resources that we have to our premium users. But yeah, it's a tricky time for everyone at the moment. So yeah, hopefully some of those suggestions can help. But if you do have any questions to follow up what I've talked about, or about Seneca more generally, now's the time to start getting them into the chat. So feel free to start typing them in, and I'll just pause for a moment. Okay, well, that looks like it might be, oh no, here we go. Stephen's got a question. So does the platform support multiple teachers for a single class? So yes, it does. So when you create a class, again, if I just actually go back to this, Stephen, I can probably show you exactly where this is. So when you create a class, here we go. You'll see that last stage is invite other teachers. So if you want to invite other teachers to your class, it's just part of the setup process. This is particularly valuable if you want to add extra support for things like head of departments getting access to data, or if you want to make sure senior leaders can see data as well, then that's an option for you as well with our free packages. Again, with our premium packages, there are sort of data support that we provide as well, to increase access to data. But if you're just simply looking for a class sharing situation, then you can add more than one teacher to a class. Okay. Are there any other questions from anyone? Otherwise, I'll leave you to your evening. Doesn't look like it. So, okay, so what I suggest is, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and create an account. You can just go to senecalearning.com and create a free account. And if you have any trouble during the setup process, hopefully you won't, just by following these sort of 5 steps. But if you do have any trouble, then feel free to get in touch with us through our customer service team. And my colleague Olivia will be happy to help. But thanks for joining. And yeah, all the best for remote learning moving forward. So thanks very much.